This video is on tensioning wheel spokes. Tensioning spokes is the essence of wheel building. If you follow these steps, anyone can build high quality wheels. The first and most important lesson by far is to slow down. We learn by doing things slowly, only increasing speed after learning the basics. If you go fast enough to make mistakes, which is the norm, you are practicing failing and not learning. This well-worn handmade tool is what I've been using for years. It's a spoke jammed into a holder with a nipple screwed on past the threads of the spoke. Orange tape on the rim covers the valve hole. I use 4 spoke wrenches. The first 3 are basic Park spoke wrenches, and I have 3 because I drop them. So it's always good to have extra ones there. The one on the right, I believe, is a DT Swiss. It's an old one, but it's got a lot more torque, and it holds the spoke on 4 sides instead of 3, so you can build to higher pressures. This is my spoke wrench with two nipples on it. Two washers on it. The gray patch covers the seam. I use it. I make sure that it's not the same color as the valve. The reason you do this is those 2 spots generally tend to be the ones that create most of the radial runout, and it's good to know where they are. You want to make sure you have an awareness of where you are on the wheel at all times. It'll help you out. I'm going to go here into the basics of lacing. I've done it in a previous video, but I'll do it again. It's really simple. And this is a process I've been using most of my life. Take a spoke head down spoke and put it to the right of the valve hole. First hole to the right of the valve hole. And you use this for all different crosses. I'm going to do 2 cross. So I take 2 head up spokes to the left of the spoke I just threaded in, and I move it to the right, second right hole, I should say, to the first spoke in there. Now, if you're going to do 3 cross, you would do 3 heads, and then lace it in. Or 4 cross, you'll do 4. But this is a 2 cross, so that's how you do it. The second spoke with the head up, that spoke goes over the spoke with the head down. So they contact there when the wheel is built. Now, here's the easy part. You've set your lacing pattern right there. You've set it. You don't have to do anything else. All you have to do is follow what you did the first time. So on the next spoke, you take the next head down spoke to the right of the first one that you threaded in. There it is. And you put it to the right, second hole to the right of the last spoke you put in. You're using every other spoke hole because you're lacing up one side of the rim at a time. We always do things in sides. I always look, if it were a front wheel, you don't have to do it in sides. But on a rear wheel, you do it in sides because the left and right side are totally different spoke lengths and different tensions and different spoking patterns. So with the next spoke, the head up spoke, you just do one to the right of the last head up spoke you put in. And that's really all there is. And then all you have to do is follow the whole thing around and do the exact same thing over and over again. When I've got one side laced, I push them all down so they tend to sit straighter in the throwing stand. This is not stressing them. I don't do that till the very end. Now these are all radial spokes. So you take a radial spoke, really any one. I always start again to the right of the valve and work my way around. And you lace it into the hole directly opposite the hub. You can do it where you don't do it directly opposite like I showed you, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. And when you do it this way, it looks nicer, in my opinion. This is the tool I use to get all the spokes nipples threaded on the same amount. It's basically a blade, a screwdriver with a boss in the center that pushes the nipple off when it hits the spoke. So after you use this, you're pretty sure that all of your spokes are threaded on about the same amount, and be real careful about that. First thing I do, I put a lube on the nipples and on the rim. I use a Garrett Wade tool that gives just a little bit of oil on every push, because you don't want to get oil all over your rim. It just makes a mess. Now I go in, I always start on the drive side, and I go in every other nipple. Normally I start at the valve hole, but I didn't here, but it'll be okay. And notice I make the nipple almost perpendicular, and it makes it a lot easier to find a hole in the end of the nipple with that drill bit. If you don't do that, you're going to have a problem finding it. And you can go pretty quick, but don't rush this. You really want to get this done right. It makes a lot of difference. If these are all threaded on exactly the same amount, your build is going to go quicker. So it's worth it to take the time to do it the right way. And after I do one side, I'll do the non-drive side. Same story. Now my goal here is to take the slack out of the spokes, not to tension them, just to bring them up so that they're not slack. Tiny bit of tension. Again, I do the drive side first, and I'm guessing how many turns I'm going to need to get all of the play out of the spoke. After you're done doing it for a while, you get pretty good at guessing that. After you do the drive side, then you do the non-drive side. And your goal here, again, is you're not truing it at all. You're just getting everything so that it's not loose. Now, the biggest mistake new wheel builders make, it's very, very common. They tension the wheel up too quickly. Your real goal, and this is really the key to making a good wheel, you do all of your adjustments under low tension. This is what the wheel looks like after I use the drill on it. First thing I'm going to do is get the lateral left to right in the ballpark. And actually this is probably good enough the way it is here. And when I get the left to right done, then I'll do the radial. And the radial, as you can see here, is about 0.010 of an inch, which is actually very good. There's not much radial run out on this at all, and that was due to using that drill the right way. You do the lateral, then you do the radial. And finally, what you do is you do all of your adjustments. Once you do the radial adjustment, that's it. You don't look at it again. Now I'm going to go back and do the lateral and get the lateral really good. A couple of thousandths, somewhere in that range. Yeah, you can see this is about, I try and get about 0.005 of an inch. And knowing that it's going to deviate a little bit when I do the other adjustments, because we're only talking about maybe 1/3 of a turn of a spoke wrench to get it within that 0.005, something like that. hopefully go on to the lateral here shortly. But as you can see, this is all in real time. So a couple of minutes for the radial is good. Now the lateral is not bad, but it's not good enough. You can get this really close. You can see there the radial is good, but the lateral is going back and forth, left and right, left and right, left and right. You can also see in there, there's a seam, and that oftentimes has a deviation that you can't fix. It just is what it is. That's okay, but I would still like to get a little bit better. It looks like it's really out of whack here. It's because of the magnification that you're getting. That's still a little out. Good enough. Okay, then first thing you do, you get out your tension meter, and you want to adjust the drive side up until it's up to its final tension. This is a laser spoke, so I'm looking at it at around 5 to 10, and it needs to get up to close to 20. So now the wheel is completely true, and I'm just going to tension the drive side first till it's right where I want it. You can hear how close in pitch those spokes are. After you do the drive side, you do the non-drive side. And when you're doing the non-drive side, all you're really doing is pulling the rim to center. That's it. Now, finally, I do this stress relieving of the spokes at the very end. And I probably don't even need to do this since I built to such high tension. My tension wheel's much higher than most people do, because you know they're going to get looser. So the higher you start with, the better off you are. And then finally, Loctite. Put a Loctite on and spin the wheel. And then you clean it up. I use Windex first and then acetone, so that it's all pretty clean. And then actually I put a rim strip on at the end and clean it again when I package it. Then finally you check the centered. Almost never out of it because the truing stand is centered, so you really don't need to do this, but it's just a double check, and it doesn't hurt to double check. Hi, I'd like to make an addition to some of the things I forgot when I was recording this video. I always seem to forget some things, that's why I have to write it down. One thing is a printed form is going to be available on a link below. I'll bring you to my website, and I will basically type out the most important parts of what I've been talking about. Then I'd just like to emphasize some things that I mentioned, but I don't think I emphasized them enough. The most important thing by far, and if you learn nothing else, this is it, is true everything to the final spec under low tension. As long as there's no loose spokes, that's the tension you want, as low as it can get. And then you want to do all of the truing under low tension. One of the biggest mistakes new wheel builders make is they try to adjust wheels when they're under full tension, and that'll just get you into trouble. There's no way around that. And the second point is, you always hear people talk about equal spoke tension as being a mantra. That's the result of the radial runout. So really the most important thing in your truing is the radial runout, because it'll determine spoke tension. It only makes sense. The spokes come from the hub and almost vertical, and so that's the one that's going to determine more tension than the lateral. Let's do all of the steps. I'll just go through them one at a time. The first thing you do after the wheel is laced is you use the drill bit or some other method. You can also tighten the spokes up to where the threads run out or something similar. But the drill is really handy, and it just really speeds it up. After you've done that, you want to do a quick check on the lateral run out. You want to get it to maybe 1/8 of an inch, which shouldn't take much time, 30 seconds, something like that. After you've done that, then you do the radial run out. And this also shouldn't take much time. One of the key things to remember is that the run out is normally at the valve stem or at the seam, which is directly opposed. So what I always do first is I look for those two spots, and I've got tape on both points so I can identify them. And I will look at how much I'm taking the radial run out on the dial indicator. And I'll go about halfway. If I've got a dial indicator that says I'm 30 thousandths out, I'll take 15 thousandths out the first time around. And then I'll flip the wheel right over to the other side and to the seam side and see where it is. Because when you pull on one side, it'll pull on the other side. So they're very much related. So you want to really check against yourself on the seam and on the valve. The radial run out, I like to start at 5 thousandths of an inch, which sounds like not a lot, but it's about 1/3 of a spoke turn, something like that. And I'd like to get it all to about 5 thousandths of an inch. You should be able to do this in 3, 4, 5 minutes once you know what you're doing. After the radial run out is done, then I go and I do a complete true of the wheel laterally. Once you do the radial run out, you don't look at it again. You only focus on one thing at a time. So the first was to get the spokes equal with the drill, and you drill the drive side spokes first and then the non-drive side. You always do it in pairs, unless it's a front wheel, which in each case they're all the same, if it's not a disc brake front wheel. So after you've done the radial run out, now you want to do the lateral, and you want to get that down real close, maybe 3 thousandths, 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch. Then your wheel is true. The rim doesn't have to be in the center. The rim has just got to be true, because when you do the next step, you're going to pull the rim over to the drive side. So that's what you do next. The first thing I do is I measure the spoke tension with a tensiometer. And I like to get the drive side up to about 150, which is very high. Almost nobody else does that. I'll check the spoke tension meter, and then I'll guess how many turns I need to do. I only want to do it once if I can, because you don't want to turn the spoke nibbles more than you have to. Generally speaking, when I'm using, for instance, a Sappi laser spoke, and the initial tension is about 5 to 10, I want to get it up to 20, and normally 3 full turns will do that. So okay, you do that. Now you get the drive side is all tensioned. The non-drive side you haven't touched. The only thing you do with your non-drive side is you tension it up to pull the rim to the center. That's all you do, and you're done. You don't really want to do anything else. You always want to focus on one thing at a time. Okay, tension 150. Oh, you see people doing truing on YouTube, and they'll only use one of the indicators, one side, because they say you can't look at 2 sides at once. You can. You don't do it at the same time, but you do it right apart. So I'll spin the reel and I'll look at the drive side, for instance, and I'll see I got about 3 thousandths. And I'll check on the non-drive side and make sure that's about the same. Then I'll move the dial indicators a little bit more and try and make sure that it's the same on both sides. That way the wheel is centered. Here's another thing. A lot of people stress relieving the spokes. They make a big deal out of it. Even some people walk on and all that stuff. What you're doing when you're stress relieving the spokes is you're bringing them past a yield point. And that yield point takes an elastic spoke. Brand new spoke is elastic. and then you push it past its yield point, and it turns it into a plastic. Why is that important? Spokes break by fatigue, and if you have an elastic spoke in there, it's going to go through more fatigue cycles than if you have a plastic spoke. So that's the key thing. You only need to do it once. You don't need to do it 3 times. If it's past its yield point, it's past its yield point. Doing it again does nothing. And if you notice, most people are not aware of this, when you buy a spoke that's 270 millimeters, it's actually 269. So they've figured out that it's going to stretch a millimeter or so. They're figuring that. I built to such high tension, I really don't need to stress relieve it because the tension alone will bring it past its yield point. I always do it at the end anyway, just for grins. Now, you might want to think, well, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of money and go out and get a dial indicator. That's a lot of hassle. But really, if you take apart TS2, right, I think almost all of the good Park drum stands, there's a flat part where the 2 calipers come. It's got a little Park logo on it. And you can buy a serviceable dial indicator from Amazon. Search for dial indicator with a flat back. Some come through with a little knob on the back, but some come through flat. If you get a flat back one, you can use super glue or some kind of glue and glue it on. So it's going to cost you 25 bucks and maybe a half hour of time. And once you work with a dial indicator, you will never want to work without it. I use both millimeter indicators and inch. Inch is probably the most common, and I think of it now in inches. But you can get either kind. That's it. I hope this was enjoyable and informative, mostly. And I'll be back in a week or 2 with another video on wheel building, or some aspect of it. Thanks a lot.